kid felt something and reflexively whipped around to see what was going on. Except he didn't stop peeing.
There's nothing better than when satisfying karma comes for people that really deserve said karma. Me personally, I don't tend to bat an eye when one of those type of people expires. Fall off a train track or slip on a banana peel from Mario Kart and slide haphazardly into a light pole or a street lamp of some sort. With that being said, today we're here to check out those times when karma came by and people got what they finally deserved. Let's do this.
You know, people call me the strongest fighter in the province, but there's one foe I could never defeat. Karma. Yep, no matter who you are, if you've done something terrible, I guarantee you'll get your just desserts. And the rest of us will be watching and laughing. From animal avengers to some particularly stinky comeuppances, here's a whole heap of times that karma came for awful people. Chipotle chump. I've never really liked Chipotle. It's much too spicy for me. But sometimes it's not just the food that's fiery. Back in September 2023, Rosemary Hain rocked up to a Chipotle restaurant in Parma, Ohio, looking for some grub. A member of the staff named Emily Russell happily served her, but Hain wasn't so happy. For some reason, she didn't like the way her order had been prepared.
I grew up in Parma when I was in Ohio. It was my first taste of actual peace in the suburbs.
To help her customer, Emily had the order remade. Hain still moaned. So Emily remade it again, but apparently it still wasn't good enough. What? Emily knew the order was fine, and it was a standard serving of exactly what she'd asked for.
Get out.
But Hain lost it.
Get out.
She started screaming, shouting, and swearing at poor Emily. Ah yes, the 3 S's, a Karen's greatest weapon. Emily tried her best to defuse the situation, handing her a business card and giving her the opportunity to contact someone higher up in the company to complain. But this wasn't good enough for Hain. Oh no. Instead of being reasonable about the situation, she picked up the bowl of hot food and slapped Emily right in the face with it. Geez, what a nut job. Luckily, the whole ordeal was caught on camera, and the cops quickly got to work looking for the fast food fiend. It didn't take long before she was facing down a judge in court. Hain was given a choice: 3 months in jail or 1 month in jail and 2 months of work in a fast food restaurant. She chose the latter, and I can only hope she had a wonderful time dealing with lovely members of the public, just like herself.
Oh boy.
Brat splat. Some parents refuse to do any actual parenting. Their precious little angels can do no wrong, and how dare you even imply they're not raising them right?
Yep.
You know, just the kind of person I'm talking about.
That's
Reddit
my sister.
user Dr. Strangelove GA used to work in a cell phone
My sister is notorious for being this type of person.
store where he met one in the wild. See, he was standing behind the counter serving a long line of customers, only not all of them were waiting patiently. One of the women in line had brought her gremlin of a child, and he was running rampant. The kid was darting around the store, knocking things over, and generally being a huge pain in the behind. Irritated, Strangelove asked the child's mother to control him and warned that he could easily get himself hurt. Sounds reasonable, but not to Supermom. He had to ask several times before she even acknowledged him, and when she finally did, she was furious. The mother immediately started loudly cursing and berating Strangelove, angrily demanding that he never tell her how to raise her own son again. But halfway through her tirade, a massive donk stopped her dead in her tracks. Her son had just run into a heavy, low-hanging sign and knocked himself out cold. Wow. Hey, don't worry, the kid turned out fine. But rather than relieved, the mom was still furious and threatened to sue the store. That is, until our hero pointed out that the whole thing had been recorded on CCTV. The boy running wild without a second glance from his negligent mother, Strangelove warning her multiple times to no avail. Yeah, she soon clammed up and slinked away, never to return. And good riddance. Please, if you have kids, don't be like that douchebag. Raise them right.
We gotta beat him.
Whiplash. People who try to hurt animals deserve everything they get. I mean, how could anybody think of harming a sweet little doggo or catto? Well, never fear, karma is here.
Delicious
Reddit user
mustard.
Other Account recalled a memory from their childhood ranch. See, the family kept horses, and so had a lunge whip for training them. Other Act's little brother was messing around with the whip one day, dragging it around so the cats chased it. Nothing wrong with that, right? But he must have gotten bored with this because suddenly he started loudly cracking the whip right next to the little felines. Terrified, they scattered. Other Act was rightfully mad and told their brother off. He could easily have hurt the poor cats. But he just looked Other Act dead in the eye and murmured, "I do what I want." Well, kid must have thought he was in a Clint Eastwood movie or something. Whatever he thought, he was wrong. Next time he went to crack the whip, it snapped back and hit him smack bang in the doodahs.
There you go.
Oof. Other Act was crying with laughter. Their brother, for very different reasons. A stinky attitude. Some people need to learn how to control their anger. Otherwise, there can be disgusting consequences. Back in 2016, a man called Cooper was checking into an airport hotel. Everything was going smoothly until a mega Karen stomped her way towards the desk. Uh-oh. Apparently, there was a major problem. This Karen only had a normal kettle in her room. Oh, the humanity.
I don't know how
She started to scream and shout at the girl serving Cooper, moaning that her room wasn't up to standard and that she'd been traveling all day. The poor girl looked like she was about to cry. Well, Cooper wasn't about to stand for that. He clapped back at the Karen, telling her everybody had been traveling and that she should get lost. Suddenly, something inside the Karen snapped. A raging storm brewed within her, something powerful, almost otherworldly. She slammed her fist on the desk and demanded to see the manager. Wow, how unexpected. But you see, she got herself so worked up that she had a violent coughing fit, and that raging storm inside her, it wasn't just anger. She coughed so hard that right there in front of everybody, she exploded from her rear end while wearing beige pants. Red-faced, the embarrassed woman promptly shut up and slunk away. As for Cooper and the girl who'd been shouted at, it was all laughs after the terrible smell had faded, of course. Horsing around. Unless I'm your hero, the people we look up to most can turn out to be total disappointments. Reddit user Potato Sunday saw this firsthand. While at a show-jumping event, they watched a little girl nervously approach one of the competitors. She was holding a book of famous horse riders and wanted the jumper to sign it for her. But as she flicked through it, she couldn't find the page with him on it. So she politely asked if he could help her. His response, "Find it yourself." And with that, he stormed off, leaving the little girl visibly upset. Fast forward a little, and the jerkwad jumper had unfortunately made it to the finals of the competition with a whopping $100,000 up for grabs. Just as his horse approached its first jump, however, something completely unexpected happened. It abruptly stopped mid-gallop, throwing the shocked jockey through the air and flat on his face. Despite being embarrassed and incredibly annoyed, the fellow was physically fine. But missing out on that $100,000 would have hurt a lot more than any bruise. Goal! Being obnoxious, bratty, and mean is never a good thing. But usually they're traits reserved for kids who don't know better. Usually, but not always. When Reddit user BoxDupe was just 7 years old, he played Little League soccer. It was a lighthearted hobby that none of the kids took too seriously. But the parents? Well, one of them proved she had the emotional maturity of a goldfish. Indeed, the snooty soccer mom would constantly make rude remarks whenever BoxDupe was benched in games. Things like, "How about putting in some effort next time?" Or, "That's what happens when you don't watch the ball." Now bear in mind, this is a woman in her 40s talking to a 7-year-old that wasn't even her kid. And what's more, she spoke quietly enough that only Box Dupe could hear her.
Douchebags.
It sucked,
Oh, yeah.
but he never said anything out of fear that he'd be called a wuss. Well, one day, Box had been benched and was quietly watching the game from the sidelines. As usual, you know who had something scathing to say about this. But then suddenly, a rogue kick sent the ball flying toward the stands. Everyone's eyes followed it as it soared through the air until with a mighty thud it slammed, bam, straight into the rude soccer mom's face. Crikey. 2 lost teeth later, and she never turned up to another soccer game again. I guess you could say, that's what happens when you don't watch the ball. Tractor trouble. Thieves. Some of them are undeniable geniuses. Others, however, are complete and utter doofuses. One night in September 2023, a tractor showroom in India caught the latter on its CCTV cameras. He'd snuck into the lot and attempted to make off with one of the tractors, and at first it looked like he was going to be successful. The villain managed to get the vehicle moving, but he wasn't prepared for just how fast it would go. Yeah, the bumbling bad guy ended up getting his feet caught under one of the rear wheels and was completely run over as the tractor rolled forward.
Oh, got him.
Ouch, that had to hurt. Somehow he picked himself up, limped to the vehicle, and drove it away, but he didn't get very far. The tractor was found a few days later, just a short walk from the showroom. As for the man himself, unfortunately he was never caught. But hey, at least he got a bruised spine to match that bruised ego.
Oh boy.
Them. Prepare yourself for a karmic tale with more twists and turns than an ornery rattlesnake. When Reddit user Ratney was 9 years old, her parents decided to take her and her sister on a trip to Disney World. So the family grabbed themselves a rental car and headed down to the Sunshine State, Florida. They even got takeout for breakfast, so it was basically the best day ever. Not that they ate it all, they were too excited. When they arrived, they left their half-eaten brekkie behind and leapt out of the car, ready to explore the park. And for the next 10 days, they had the greatest time of their lives. I'm not jealous, you're jealous. Anyway, when it was all over, they returned to their rental car and were shocked swiftly back to reality. Ants on a scale you've never seen before. They were crawling everywhere, all over the seats, out of the air vents, up the windows. It was awful. But most of all, piles upon piles of them were writhing around on what remained of the kids' 10-day-old pancakes. So that was the reason. Now, the car needed to be returned to the lot that day, but they only had a crummy portable vacuum to try and get rid of them. 20 minutes of desperate vacuuming later, and though piles of the insects had diminished, there was still a horrific amount scuttling around. There was no choice. The family squeamishly jumped in the car, dashed to the rental place, and prepared to grovel. When the dad stepped inside, however, there was a woman screeching at the employee behind the desk. Apparently, she really needed a mid-sized car, and it was out of order that the lot didn't have one. The torrent of verbal abuse got nastier and nastier, until suddenly the dad realized that the car he'd been using would be perfect for her. So he held up his keys, the woman's eyes lit up, practically salivating. She demanded he hand them over. The employee tried to point out that it might need a clean first, but the she-beast wasn't having it. Apparently, she didn't care if it was clean. And just like that, she snatched the keys, ran to the car, and took off. Well, something tells me she did end up caring when she realized her precious mid-sized car was absolutely infested with hungry ants. I like to think she was carried off back to their nest.
Damn.
Monkey mayhem. Don't mess with monkey. Monkey strong. Monkey fast. Something one little brat found out all too well. Over in Bali, Indonesia, there's a magical place called Ubud Monkey Forest, a sanctuary housing over 1,260 long-tailed macaques. Redditor Tardigrades was visiting for the day watching the majestic creatures respectfully with other tourists. Only not everyone was showing such reverence. One irritated little boy started poking one of them with a stick, clearly enjoying terrorizing the poor monkey. And for a short time, it looked like the macaque was going to let it happen. But then the little brat gave it a particularly vicious prod, and it was immediately obvious he'd gone too far. In the blink of an eye, Curious George became Cantankerous George and snapped. The macaque leapt at the kid, who span around in a panic and tried to escape, but he didn't get far. The monkey grabbed his pants and, with a tremendous tug, pulled them straight down to his ankles. With a satisfying smack, the kid hit the deck as everyone watched and smirked. Monkey strong, monkey fast, monkey will show off your ass. The Wet Bandit. Urinals are awkward at the best of times, but aptly named Reddit user, Always Bring a Towel, recalled a story from his school days that put my awkward encounters to shame. Towel was stood at the urinal taking a whiz by another kid when suddenly he saw something out of his peripheral vision. An older kid that was a known bully had crept into the bathroom behind them and was reaching over into the other kid's pocket. What? Towel realized he was pulling out his wallet. Well, this turned out to be a big mistake. Just as the bully thought he'd gotten away with it, the kid felt something and reflexively whipped around to see what was going on. Except he didn't stop peeing. Towel watched on in transfixed amusement as the kid's golden stream was propelled slop-bang into the bully's horrified face. Coughing and sputtering, the older kid dropped the wallet and ran away in abject humiliation. I guess now we know why our guy's Reddit username is Always Bring a Towel.
Damn.
The Peeing Party Goer. So we've had a karma-rific pee-related tale about kids. How about an even more karma-rific pee-related tale involving adults? I know, only the most highbrow content on my channel. Party-goer Kara Johnson was at a nightclub in Barcelona with some friends back in July 2017. The group booked a VIP table and were sat chatting with a few drinks. Nothing could spoil the evening, right? Well... Suddenly, an absolutely wasted girl stumbled out from the crowd towards their table, picked up an empty cup, and turned away from them with it. Turning away wasn't enough to hide what she was clearly doing, though. In horror, Kira and her friends watched as the girl began peeing straight into it, right there, in the middle of the club. Blah, 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 blah. To make matters worse, when she was finally finished, she leaned over and placed the now urine-filled cup on Kara's VIP table, right next to some other drinks, and began to stumble away again. What? But one of her friends wasn't having it. In a dash of divine inspiration, she picked up the pee cup aimed just right and threw it all over the drunk girl's back. Wow. Most incredibly of all, the girl was so out of it, she didn't even react to having her own warm pee thrown all over her. Man, alcohol really does turn people into cavemen, huh? The Karma Llama. I've loved llamas ever since watching The Emperor's New Groove, so I'm immediately sus of anyone who doesn't. Well, American zookeeper Catherine met just such a person. See, Catherine was near the llama enclosure when she saw a horrid woman stomp up to one of the llamas, point at it, and make fun of how ugly it was. Now, this llama had actually been rescued from a terrible situation and had undergone corrective jaw surgery, so naturally it looked a little different to the others. The rude lady took one look at the recovering animal, however, and thought it was hilarious, charming. Catherine was livid. How dare she make fun of her furry friend? Before she could intervene, though, the rescue llama took vengeance into its own hands by spitting directly into the laughing lady's open mouth. While the horrible woman gagged and flailed in horror, Catherine quietly gave her llama a treat and told her that she was a good girl. I salute you, rescue llama. Joyriding. Our next tale of karmic comeuppance comes from the sunny streets of England. Reddit user JC Grimshaw lived on a street that had just had some new speed bumps installed to deter joyriders. Problem is, they didn't work. Whoever the culprits were, they were only encouraged to joyride more because, well, they were idiots. Sure enough, Grimshaw came home from school one day to find one of them zipping around dangerously on a dirt bike. Then the hooligan started speeding towards an oncoming car, clearly trying to intimidate the driver. Only he hit the throttle too hard and wound up mounting the car's hood, launching it into the sky, and landing with a crash on the windscreen. Jeez. Panicked, the shamed biker tried to run away, but fell straight on his ass. He must have broken something. Oh, Karma, you sly dog, you. But that wasn't all. You might be wondering about the driver of the car. Now, don't worry, he was fine. But in fact, in a wild twist, he was an undercover cop. Damn. So, hysterically, the hooligan found himself nearly instantly locked in cuffs and taken away. A double dose of karmic medicine. Rainforest Wrath. I love the Rainforest Cafe. If you've never been to one, their restaurant's themed like, you guessed it, a rainforest. You've got plants, animatronic gorillas, and, in Galveston, Texas, even a river raft ride. Redditor Migzors worked there, operating said ride, when one fateful day, a family of 5 rather large people approached. Migzors politely explained that they could have a go, but there was a strict weight limit on the ride, so they'd need to separate into different groups. Well, they weren't happy about that. One particularly big woman took extreme offense and accused Migzors of calling her fat. She started berating the operator and her colleagues, demanding that the group be allowed to ride together. So, sick of the abuse, Migzors relented. If they wanted to ride together, let them have at it. The family smugly clambered into the raft and the ride began. Right away, some water poured in, but they were still floating, for now. As Migzors watched the group on the security cameras, however, she noticed with satisfaction that they were slowly but surely sinking. Who would have guessed? And it wasn't long before they noticed too. Our hero watched on as the raft sunk lower and lower until suddenly, sploosh, water came pouring in like a tsunami. The whole family started screaming as the vessel took a nosedive and they were plunged into the cold river below. Migzors finally stopped the ride and went over to check on them. Well, it's safe to say they weren't mouthing off anymore. The soaking wet, humiliated riders had to be helped out of the water and were forced to do the walk of shame past an amused queue of customers. Well, they were warned. Ain't the sharpest tools. I've worked in retail. Trust me, it destroys your faith in humanity. Take this tale from Reddit user Outaspec. While he was working at a home improvement store, 2 obnoxious fellas walked in and demanded a tool that he'd never heard of before. Now, Spec was a department head in this store, so if he'd never heard of it, it probably didn't exist. But on the off chance, he Googled it anyway. And sure enough, his suspicions were confirmed. It wasn't real. So Spec politely delivered the bad news. Now, what do you reckon the response was? A normal person would either describe what they were looking for in more detail, or thank the server and leave. Well, not these knuckleheads. Instead, one of them snapped, "See, I told you these idiots don't know what they're doing." But Spec wasn't going to just stand there and take it. He simply smiled and glanced at his computer. Then he told them that actually they were in luck. Another store 2 cities over had one right now that they could go and pick up. But they'd have to be fast about it, so the 2 jerks hurriedly ran off. An hour and a half later, the store phone started ringing. Spec grabbed the receiver and, sure enough, it was the 2 bozos again. Immediately, they started spitting vitriol about how they'd traveled all the way to the second store only to find out the tool they'd promised wasn't there. Then they gave a description of Spec, without realizing they were talking to him, of course. Spec promised that the department head would thoroughly reprimand the employee. Then he hung up, smiled, and took a long lunch. The only tools they'd ever see would be the ones in the mirror. Don't skip leg day. Reddit user Velvet Seahorse used to work in the ER of a hospital. One evening, an injured woman was brought in after a stranger attacked her in the street. The scumbag had jumped the woman and tried to drag her off, but was thankfully chased away by a good Samaritan who'd called the authorities. Whew, that could have been a lot worse.
Weirdos.
And it would be for the scumbag. Around 20 minutes later, someone else was brought into the ER in full cardiac arrest. Any guesses who? Yeah, it was the guy who jumped the woman. Turns out the cops had quickly tracked him down and had given chase. But it seems he should have done more cardio. Having to sprint several blocks for his freedom caused his heart to give out. In the most extreme case of got what he deserved we've seen yet, the Crete passed away almost as soon as he was dragged into the ER.
Thank you, God. Yep, there it is.
Let me play a sad song on the world's smallest violin. And on that...
Well, with that being said, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure to comment, like, and or subscribe. Make sure to subscribe to Be Amazed as well to make great videos. Twisms!